The Amazon that people imagine is usually green and generous. Wide rivers shining under the sun, wooden boats cutting through brown water, birds flashing between the trees, lodges promising untouched nature, with clean sheets and breakfast included. That Amazon exists, but it is only the surface. Behind that postcard is another Amazon, one that appears on official maps, but not on ordinary itineraries. An Amazon where the barrier is not a legend, not a monster in the forest, not a dramatic warning sign for tourists to ignore. The barrier is law, logistics, disease, cultural autonomy, and sometimes the simple moral fact that curiosity does not create a right to enter. In this journey, forbidden means restricted, inaccessible, or ethically untouchable, not an invitation to invade. So subscribe, not because this is a travel guide, but because it is almost the opposite. A map of places you may only know through aerial images, official reports, research stations, patrols, and the old discipline of knowing when to stay outside. Number 13. Ferreira Pena Scientific Station, Caxiuana National Forest, Pará. At first glance, this may seem like the most welcoming place on the list. A clearing in the forest, wooden structures, researchers walking between buildings with notebooks, boots, and the tired look of people who have just been bitten by 5 different species of insect before breakfast. The Ferreira Pena Scientific Station sits inside the Caxiuana National Forest in Pará and was established in 1993 as a research base linked to the Museu Paraense Emílio Goeldi. It has an urbanized area of about 6,000 square meters and built structures of around 3,000 square meters, modest numbers when compared with the forest around it, but enormous when you remember where it is. This is not a jungle hotel hiding behind academic language. It is a working scientific base. People go there to study plants, animals, climate, archaeology, riverside communities, and the long, complicated pulse of the Amazon. Field courses and guided visits may happen, but the logic of the place is research, not tourism. Scientific activities in federal conservation units often require authorization through CISBio, the ICMBio system for research and biological collection permits. The barrier here is not a wall. It is bureaucracy, purpose, and logistics. There is no casual line of transport where a tourist buys a ticket and appears at the station with a camera and romantic ideas. Teams move with planning, authorization, equipment, boats, fuel, and institutional responsibility. Caxiuana teaches the first lesson of this countdown. Some places are not forbidden because they are hiding treasure. They are restricted because knowledge itself requires discipline. Number 12. Montanas do Tumucumaque National Park, Amapá and Pará. Now the map widens until the human imagination starts to fail. Montanas do Tumucumaque National Park spreads across the north of Brazil like a green country within the country. Created in 2002, it covers about 3.165 million hectares, making it one of the largest tropical forest protected areas on Earth. From above, the park looks almost unreal. Endless canopy, rivers like dark veins, mountains rising quietly near the borderlands. It is a place that sounds like it should belong to expedition books, not weekend plans. And technically, visitation exists. That is the strange part. You can look at the rules and think, so it is allowed. But paper is polite. The forest is not. ICMBio states that public visitation requires prior authorization from park management, and visitors need guides or tourism agencies with rustic camping structures such as the Jupará base or camps deep in the forest. So this is not forbidden in the absolute sense. It is more subtle, permitted in theory, punishing in practice. Distance, cost, weather, river levels, insects, navigation, and the absence of ordinary infrastructure all become part of the gate. Tumukumake is the kind of place that reminds you that accessibility is not a natural condition. It is something society builds. And here, society has barely touched the door. Number 11. Serra do Arauca State Park, Amazonas. Serra do Arauca does not look like the Amazon people expect. It rises like a lost world, a tepui landscape of cliffs, plateaus, mist, waterfalls, and vegetation that seems to belong to another geological chapter. It is in Barcelos, Amazonas, and the official area is about 118,700 hectares. The image is almost too cinematic. Dark stone walls, clouds dragging across the summit, water dropping from high escarpments into forest that looks untouched because in many ways it remains very difficult to touch. But Serra do Arauca is not just remote beauty. It is territorial complexity carved into the map. Large portions overlap with the Yanomami indigenous land and the Amazonas National Forest, creating a management puzzle where environmental protection, indigenous rights, and federal and state institutions all meet in the same green space. One source describes about 82% overlap with Yanomami territory and 58% with the Amazonas National Forest. This is where the Amazon stops being a fantasy of empty wilderness. It is not empty. It is protected, inhabited, claimed, administered, studied, and contested. The mountain may look silent, but the map around it is speaking very loudly. For the viewer, the practical implication is simple. This is not a place for improvisation. Access is extreme, permissions matter, and overlapping territories mean that beauty cannot be separated from responsibility. Serra do Arauca looks like a secret entrance to another planet. In truth, it is a reminder that even paradise has legal borders. Number 10. Mashco Piro, indigenous land of the Chandless River. Acre. Here the tone changes. Until now, the barriers were mostly science, conservation, and distance. At the Chandless River, the barrier becomes human survival. In Acre, near the border dynamics of Brazil and Peru, the Mashco Piro indigenous land of the Chandless River is connected to protection measures for isolated indigenous peoples. In 2025, FUNAI signed a restriction of use ordinance for the territory after years of pressure and legal action, with the goal of protecting isolated Mashco Piro people. The forest here does not need to look dramatic to be dangerous. A quiet river bend, a patch of trees, a canoe mark, an abandoned object. Any of these can become evidence of a human presence that has deliberately avoided permanent contact with national society. And that is the point. The danger is not only to the visitor, it is to the people who live there. Contact can bring disease, panic, violence, and disruption. A tourist might see mystery. The state sees vulnerability. Indigenous organizations see rights. The law sees a boundary. You can look at the name on a map. You cannot treat it like a destination. The restriction exists because the people inside that forest are not characters in someone else's adventure. Some doors are closed not to hide what is inside, but to keep it alive. Number 9. Memoria Grande, Southern Amazonas. Memoria Grande does not have the global fame of some places on this list. It does not arrive with an image already installed in the public imagination. That is exactly why it matters. In the south of Amazonas, Memoria Grande became one of those names that appears in official measures because the forest still contains lives that the outside world barely understands. FUNAI confirmed the presence of isolated indigenous people there in 2021, and a restriction of use ordinance for the area was published in December 2024. There is something chilling about that kind of bureaucratic sentence. Presence confirmed. It sounds cold, but behind it may be a basket found in the forest, a trail, a shelter, a glimpse, a pattern understood by specialists who are trained not to rush toward contact. The restriction is not decorative. Funai has described continued monitoring and the involvement of health authorities, because protection here is also a public health issue. Memoria Grande shows that forbidden can mean a survival zone. Not a dramatic red line for thrill seekers, but a space where the outside world is deliberately slowed down, so another way of living has a chance to continue. The most important thing about Memoria Grande is not that you cannot go there. It is that someone else may still be able to remain there. Number 8. Jacareúba, Catauixi, Indigenous Land, Amazonas. There are places that almost never enter the tourist imagination, and yet they are central to the moral geography of a country. Jacareúba, Catauixi, is one of them. Located in Amazonas, in the region of Canutama and La Brea, the Jacareúba, Catauixi area has been subject to restriction of use measures connected to isolated indigenous peoples. A 2023 ordinance described the territory for administrative control and referred to an approximate area of 647,386 hectares. That number is difficult to feel. So imagine a space larger than many famous national parks, not promoted with scenic viewpoints, not packaged in glossy videos, not waiting for a traveler with a drone. It exists in the national consciousness, mostly when courts, agencies, or indigenous rights organizations mention it. The barrier here is invisibility turned into protection. Jacareúba, Catauixi, is not famous because fame itself can become a threat. The less the public knows in practical terms, the safer the territory may be. And yet, ignorance is not protection by itself. It takes ordinances, monitoring, enforcement, and political will. Otherwise, the empty space on someone's tourist map becomes an open invitation to land grabbers, illegal extraction, and violence. This is one of the Amazon's cruel paradoxes. A place can be unknown to tourists and still be intensely threatened. Number 7. Piripicura Indigenous Land, Mato Grosso. Piripicura carries a heavier silence. In Mato Grosso, this territory has been associated with some of the most emotionally difficult stories about isolated indigenous peoples in Brazil. Survivors, disappearance, pressure from surrounding economic interests, and the fragile line between existence and erasure. Funai has included Piripicura among territories whose restriction of use ordinances were renewed to protect isolated peoples. This is where curiosity becomes morally dangerous. People here, last survivors, and want a face, a name, a documentary close-up, a final image. But the policy of non-contact exists precisely because turning survival into spectacle can become another form of violence. Piripicura is not a mystery for outsiders to solve. It is a warning about what happens when entire peoples are pushed to the edge of the map, and then the map is treated as property. If you are still watching, subscribe, because the deeper this list goes, the less it behaves like a travel video, and the more it becomes an uncomfortable test of what kind of explorer you think you are. A real explorer knows that some distances must remain distances. Number 6. Tanaru Indigenous Land, Rondonia. Tanaru feels like a wound, with trees growing over it. In Rondonia, the Tanaru Indigenous Land is remembered in connection with the man widely known outside his people as the indigenous man of the whole, believed to have been the last survivor of his group after massacres and invasions. He was found dead in 2022, and the territory became one of the most melancholic symbols of Brazil's policy toward isolated peoples. Protection, arriving after almost everything had already been lost. Funai renewed the restriction of use ordinance for Tanaru in 2025, stating that access to the area is limited to people authorized by its General Coordination for Isolated and Recently Contacted Indigenous Peoples, and that exploitation of natural resources is prohibited during the ordinance's validity. This is not a preserved land in the cheerful sense. It is not preserved because tourists should one day admire it. It is preserved because memory needs land. Because violence leaves geography behind. Because a forest clearing can become a grave marker without a stone. The practical rule is clear. You do not go there. Not to mourn, not to investigate, not to satisfy the morbid hunger that often disguises itself as interest. Tanar'u is the place where the Amazon stops whispering mystery and starts speaking accusation. Number 5. Ituna Itata, Indigenous Land, Para. Ituna Itata is a name that should feel like a red warning light on the map of Para. Located in the municipalities of Altamira and Senador José Porfirio, it has been under restriction of use measures related to records of isolated indigenous people. In June 2025, FUNAI renewed the ordinance for the territory, maintaining the prohibition on unauthorized entry, permanence, and circulation in an area of about 140,400 hectares. Those words, entry, permanence, circulation, matter. They are the grammar of a protected boundary. You cannot enter. You cannot stay. You cannot move through it as if the forest were a neutral shortcut. Ituna Itata has also become associated with pressure, deforestation, and the long struggle to transform legal protection into actual protection. The tragedy of many Amazonian territories is that a rule written in Brasilia may arrive in the forest as a fragile thing, surrounded by roads, chainsaws, documents of doubtful origin, and men who know how to turn distance into impunity. For a viewer, the implication is not complicated. This is not a hidden gem. It is a protected territory under pressure. The correct response is not, "How do I get in?" The correct response is, "Why is it so hard to keep others out?" In Ituna Itata, the forbidden sign is not theatrical. It is defensive. Number 4. Masako Indigenous Land, Rondonia. Masako feels almost like a parallel world, not because its people are unreal, but because the outside world knows them mostly through absence. In Rondonia, FUNAI has monitored the isolated people of the Masako Indigenous Land for more than 35 years. The monitoring is indirect, based on annual expeditions, signs, traces, and careful reading of what is left behind, not on forced contact. In early 2025, FUNAI released information about images of isolated indigenous people in Masako and Kawahiva do Rio Pardo, reaffirming the importance of protection without invasion. Think about that. A modern state with satellites, aircraft, databases, and cameras chooses restraint. It sees enough to know that people are there, and then it stops before the act of knowing becomes an act of harm. Masako fascinates because the mystery remains intact. But that mystery is not an entertainment product. It exists because contact is avoided. The most respectful image may be a distant one. The most responsible story may be incomplete. There is something deeply humbling about that. In an age when everything is filmed, tagged, mapped, and uploaded, Masako insists on a different rule. Not everything living in the world has to become content. You can know that Masako exists. You do not get to consume it. Number 3. Yanomami Indigenous Land, Roraima and Amazonas. The Yanomami territory is famous, but fame has not protected it from being misunderstood. Spanning Roraima and Amazonas, the Yanomami Indigenous Land is one of the largest indigenous territories in Brazil and one of the most internationally recognized. Yet recognition does not mean access. It does not mean the public can approach it as if it were a dramatic landscape with a famous name attached. The territory has faced severe pressures from illegal mining, disease, malnutrition, violence, and environmental destruction. During the federal public health emergency declared in 2023, FUNAI and SESAI established access procedures for the Yanomami indigenous land. Existing authorizations had to be reevaluated, and new authorizations were suspended during the emergency period. This is where the idea of forbidden becomes painfully practical. It is not about secrecy, it is about health. A visitor is not just a person with a backpack. A visitor can be a vector. A boat can carry supplies, but also influenza. A plane can bring help, but also disruption. A gold miner can bring mercury, violence, and hunger. The Yanomami territory looks from far away like a vast green shield. But inside that shield are communities, languages, memories, gardens, rivers, and graves. There are also scars left by outsiders who decided that the forest was worth more as extraction than as home. The place seems remote until you understand how violently the outside world has already arrived. Number 2. Cajajiva do Rio Pardo Indigenous Land, Mato Grosso and Amazonas. The Cajajiva do Rio Pardo territory feels like the scene in a documentary where the music drops low and the viewer realizes the story is still unfolding. For decades, the Cajajiva have been described as an isolated and highly vulnerable people under pressure from land grabbing, illegal logging, mining, and the expansion of economic frontiers. In 2026, after a long wait, Brazil began the physical demarcation of the Cajajiva do Rio Pardo indigenous land, a territory of about 410,000 hectares located between Mato Grosso and Amazonas. Physical demarcation may sound dull until you imagine what it means on the ground. Concrete markers, signs, boundaries that can be seen by people who pretend not to understand maps. A line saying, "This forest is not empty, not available, not waiting for the next buyer with a forged document or the next chainsaw with a business plan." The cinematic temptation is to imagine the Cajajiva moving silently through the forest, aware of the outside world pressing around them. But even that image must be handled carefully. They are not symbols first. They are people first. The demarcation does not turn the territory into a destination. It turns it into a stronger refusal. It tells outsiders that the correct direction is away. Cajajiva do Rio Pardo is not a lost world being discovered. It is a living world trying not to be cornered. Number 1. Vale do Javari Indigenous Land, Amazonas. And finally, the frontier that feels like the natural end of this countdown. Vale do Javari. In the far west of Amazonas, near the borders with Peru and Colombia, the Vale do Javari Indigenous Land is the kind of place that makes scale feel almost useless. It is the second largest indigenous land in Brazil, homologated in 2001, with about 8,554 million hectares. It is home to indigenous peoples, including Kanamari, Kulinapano, Marubo, Matis, Matses, Korubo, and Tsohom Diapa, and it has one of the largest concentrations of records of isolated indigenous peoples in the world. 8.5 million hectares. Rivers, flooded forest, high ground, villages, patrol bases, illegal routes, memories, languages, hunting paths, gardens, and areas where outsiders should not even imagine themselves as protagonists. Vale do Javari is often described with superlatives: huge, remote, dangerous, isolated, extraordinary. But the most important word may be alive. It is not a blank green zone at the edge of Brazil. It is a territory of peoples who have names, politics, grief, humor, enemies, alliances, and the right to decide how close the outside world is allowed to come. The region has also been marked by violence and illegal activity, including invasions and extractive crimes. Federal operations have targeted illegal mining there, and official reports emphasize protection plans for the territory. For the viewer, Vale do Javari is the clearest moral line in the entire list. This is not a secret paradise waiting for adventurous tourists. It is not the final boss of Amazon travel. It is not a forbidden place that becomes more attractive because the gate is closed. It is a living territory whose survival may depend on remaining outside the reach of spectacle. And that is the strange lesson of these 13 places. The Amazon is not only powerful because it lets us enter. Sometimes it is powerful because it refuses us. We are trained to think that seeing is the highest form of knowing. But in the Amazon, there are places where not seeing is the beginning of respect. There are forests that should remain distant, rivers that should not receive our boats, names that should not become itineraries, and borders that exist because history has already taken too much. The hidden Amazon is not asking for our conquest, it is asking for our restraint. And perhaps that is what makes it more fascinating than any destination sold with a brochure. The knowledge that some places can only continue to exist if we accept that we may never stand inside them.